Hello everyone, this week we are going to talk about income inequality and poverty. So let's first talk about how much income inequality exists in the United States. You see two graphs on the screen, and these graphs represent data on money income in the United States. First one, which is on your left, shows that the share of before tax annual money income by quintile, which is by each fifth of the total population of families, and they are ranked from the lowest to the highest. If there were total income inequality, each quintile, which represents the 20% of the data, or 20% of families, would generate 20% of the aggregate income. Given the differences in education, skills, ability, work effort, age, family size, and other factors among families, clearly we would not expect this to be the case. Some families will be able to generate more income than others. It's, however, informative to look at the shares of income by quintile. During the last 4 decades, the share of income earned by top quintile has steadily risen, whereas that earned by the bottom group has fallen. In 1970, as you see on the screen, the top quintile earned 40.9% of the aggregate money income, while the share earned by the lowest quintile was 5.4%. By 2014, the share of before-tax money income of the top group has risen to 48.9%, whereas the earned by the bottom 20% of families had fallen to 3.6%. Thus, in 2014, the top quintile of families earned approximately 14 times as much before tax money income as the bottom quintile of families. Now the right panel, as you see here, presents data on household income by quintile. There are 3 major differences between the data of the left and right panels. First, the data for the right panel are for households rather than families. In addition to families, households include individuals living by themselves and unrelated people living together. Second, the right panel income figures include in-kind government transfers, which boost the income share of the bottom quintiles. So we have here transfer payments. Third, the right panel includes income shares after taxes. Under a system of progressive taxation, such as that of the United States, taxes take a larger share of income as one's earnings increase. As a result, we would expect after-tax incomes to be more equal than before tax incomes. This is actually the case when you compare these two figures. The after-tax income share of the bottom quintile is now 6.3% of the total in 2011. The after-tax income share of the top quintile was 46.6% in 2011. The income of the top quintile before taxes was 9.5 times that of the bottom quintile, but the ratio declines to 7.4% after taxes. Now the next thing we will talk about the reasons, factors that influence distribution of income. A high proportion of annual income inequality is due to differences in age, education, family size, marital status, number of earners in the family, and time work. So when we look at the data, young, inexperienced workers, students, single-parent families, and retirees are overrepresented among those with low incomes. And this table highlights major differences between high and low-income families that underlie the distributional data of the previous 2 graphs. The typical high-income family, which is top 20%, is headed by a well-educated person. Look at here, 65% compared to 12%, bottom quintile, top quintile. In prime working age phase of his life. Prime working age is 35 to 64 years old. His or her income is supplemented by the earnings of other family members. Look at here, earners per family, 63% of them have a second earner in the family. In contrast, people with little education, here you can see that bottom quintile, college degree is only 12%, non-working retirees, younger workers, look at the age group, younger workers and non-working retirees, single parent families, 55 compared to 6 year, are substantially overrepresented among low-income families. In 2011, 26% of the householders in the lowest income quintile failed to complete high school, compared with only 2% for the highest income quintile. Although only 12% of the household heads in the bottom quintile completed college, 65% of the householders in the top group did so. 75% of the high-income families had household heads in the prime working age category, compared with only 47% of the low-income families. Only one parent was present in 55% of the low-income families, whereas 94% of the high-income group were dual-parent families. High-income families are also larger than low-income families, which might surprise you. In 2014, there were 3.4 people per family in the top income quintile, compared to only 3.1 people per family in the bottom quintile. So here are our results. Why has income inequality increased? Income inequality in the US has increased due to the growth of both single parent and dual earner families. So single parent families increase the amount of low income quintile, and dual earners increase the share of high income earners. Earnings differentials on the basis of skill and education. Education and skill creates a wage differences. High educated people on average earn 27% more than high school graduates, and that wage differences increase over the time. The number of winner-take-all markets, and we have athletes, actors, CEOs of the big companies that all increase over this period of the time. Therefore, they increase the share of the top quintile. Lower marginal income tax rates, including high earners to report more income. In the past, marginal income tax for the top quintile was 70% and it dropped to 35%. Therefore, it increases incentives for these people to report more income over the time. And next, we talk about income mobility and inequality in economic status. Annual income data hide the movement of people up and down the income distribution over time. Tracking of household income over time shows there is considerable movement both up and down the income spectrum. And this table presents data on the mobility of individual income between 1987 and 2007 in the United States of those aged 35 and 40 in 1987. The data compared the relative income positions of the same individuals at two different points in time. Based on their 1987 income, each family was placed into income quintiles ranked from highest to lowest. Later, the 2007 real income level of the same individuals was used once again to group the income of each by quintiles. The first row, as you see here, highest quintile, shows the relative income position in 2007 of the people in the top quintile of income recipients in 1987. Approximately here 48.4% of those with incomes in the top quintile in 1987 were able to maintain their position after 20 years later. Slightly more than, which is the remaining part, 52% of the top income group in 1987, which is the remaining part, had fallen to a lower income quintile by 2007. However, only about 15% of high-income individuals fell to one of the bottom two quintiles of 2007 income distribution. This suggests that once families are able to achieve high-income status, they rarely fall back to a very low level of income. The bottom row here you see shows the lowest quintile, and that tracks the experience of those in the lowest income quintile in 1987. Slightly more than 2/5, which is 42.3% of the individuals in the lowest income quintile, remained there in 2007. More than 1/4, 28.7%, move up to one of the top 3 income quintiles in 2007. Among those in the next two lowest income quintile in 1987, nearly 1/2, which is 46.7%, had moved up to one of the 3 higher income groupings by 2017. See here? So the income mobility data reveals something concealed by the annual figures. There is considerable movement up and down in the economic ladder. relative income positions often change over time. A sizable portion of those with a high relative income during 1 year subsequently find themselves in a lower income position. At the same time, many of those with low relative incomes during a given year move up to higher income quintiles in subsequent years. So next we talk about poverty in the United States, and this table presents data on both the number of poor families and the poverty rate for the years 1959, 1976 and 2014. In 2014, 9.5 million families, or 11.6% of the total, were classified as poor. As this table shows, there has been a substantial change in the composition of the poverty population during the last several decades. In 1959, elderly people and the working poor formed the core of the poverty population. You can see here 22% and 70%. 22% of the poor families were headed by an elderly person in 1956 versus only 11% in 2014. In 1959, 70% of the heads of the poor families work at least part of the year, but in 2014, only 43% of them work during the year. In recent decades, the proportion of families headed by women in the United States has increased, whereas the proportion of husband-wife families has declined. Because the poverty rate of families headed by women is several times higher than the rate of husband-wife families, you can see here husband-wife is 6.2% and female-headed families is 30.6%. An increase in family instability tends to push the poverty rate upward. Rather than calculating the poverty rate of families, one could measure the poverty rate of individuals. The poverty rate of individuals is, in fact, somewhat higher than the poverty rate of families. In 2014, you compare 14.8% for poverty level of individuals versus 11.6% for families. The poverty rate of Black individuals in 2014 is 26.2%, compared with 12.7% for white individuals. Nonetheless, more than 2/3 of the people in the poverty were white. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of poverty is its impact on children. Moreover, the poverty rate among children has been increasing. It was 16% in 1976, now it's 21.1%. So next we talk about income transfers. Income transfers have expanded substantially since the mid-1960s. These transfers have been largely ineffective at reducing the poverty rate. Though real per capita income has increased substantially over time, the poverty rate of working-age Americans has stayed about the same. You can see on the screen the poverty rate 1947 and 2014. The official poverty rate of US families declined sharply during 1950s and 1960s. Since 1968, the official poverty rate has fluctuated within a range, generally between 9% and 12%. And in 2014, it was 11.6%, slightly higher than in 1968. You see on the screen poverty rate between 1947 and 2014. The blue line indicates the official poverty rate of families during 1947 and 2014. The red dashed line indicates the drop in the poverty rate when taxes, in-kind transfer benefits, and health insurance benefits provided by employers are counted as income. The adjusted poverty rate, which is the red one, was between 7% and 8% throughout most of the 1995 and 2014. On average, the adjusted rate was 3% points lower than the official rate. And next we talk about why haven't anti-poverty programs been more effective. Anti-poverty transfers generate 3 unintended secondary effects that slow progress against poverty. The first one is income-linked transfers reduce the incentive of low-income individuals to earn, develop their skills, move up the job ladder, and escape poverty. When poor families qualify for multiple programs, implicit marginal tax rate of 50, 60, 70% and higher are not unusual. Second, income transfers to the poor tend to reduce the opportunity cost of choices that lead to poverty. Thus, the use transfers to reduce the hardship of poverty and discouraging behavior that leads to poverty are in conflict. and this is called Samaritan's Dilemma. And finally, government anti-poverty transfers crowd out private charitable efforts. When people perceive that the government is providing for the poor, action by families, churches, and civic organizations become less urgent. Let's talk about some concluding thoughts about income inequality. To non-economists, income transfers look like an easy way to help targeted beneficiaries. However, economic analysis indicates that it's actually quite difficult to transfer income to a group of recipients in a way that will improve their long-term well-being. Governments must establish a criteria for receipt of transfers. Without a criteria, benefit programs would exhaust the budget. Typically, governments require one of the following 4 criteria. Recipients are required to do something, own something, buy something, or be something. Meeting these qualifying criteria erodes much of the benefits. Let's start with the first one. When beneficiaries have to do something, wait in line, fill out forms, lobby government officials, take an exam, endure delays, or contribute to selected political campaigns in order to qualify for a transfer, much of their potential gain will be eroded. Second, when beneficiaries have to own something in order to get a subsidy, people will bid up the price of the asset needed to acquire the subsidy. Third, when beneficiaries have to purchase something, for instance health insurance or college education, in order to get the transfer will increase the demand and drive up the price, eroding the net gain of the beneficiaries. Fourth, when beneficiaries have to be something, poor, unemployed, a farmer, homeowner in a flood-prone area, it will increase the occurrence of the adverse event, thereby reducing their well-being. Positive economics cannot determine how much inequality should be present. Income inequality reflects the differences between individuals and influences their incentive to develop resources and engage in productive activities. The nature of the process, as well as the pattern of income distribution, is relevant to the issue of fairness. So this is the end of chapter 28.